The distant boom of thunder rolled across the plains as Flint Morgan reined in his horse at the edge of a ravine, a trickle of unease running down his spine. The year was 1875, and the Montana Territory was unforgiving to those who traveled alone. Rain had begun to fall, turning the earth dark and slick beneath his mount's hooves. As lightning split the sky, illuminating the rugged landscape in harsh white light, he spotted a crumpled form at the bottom of the wash, barely visible through the curtain of rain. "Easy, Thunder," he murmured to his stallion, dismounting with practiced ease despite the ache in his bones from days in the saddle. The journey back to Challies had been long, and all he wanted was a hot meal and his own bed at the ranch. Instead, he found himself scrambling down the muddy slope, one hand on his Colt revolver. The form took shape as he approached a woman, her dress torn and mudded, golden hair fanned out across the ground like a halo. Blood had seeped through the fabric at her side, though the rain was washing it away in pale rivulets. Flint knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her neck, relieved to find a pulse, however faint. "Miss," he called, gently turning her face toward him. She couldn't have been more than 25, with delicate features now marred by a bruise blooming across her left cheek. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of summer grass. Her lips parted, and in a voice barely audible above the rain, she whispered, "Flint." The sound of his own name froze him in place. He'd never seen this woman before, would have remembered if he had. Yet somehow she knew him. As he shifted to lift her, something caught the dim light, a glint of metal clutched in her right hand. With careful movements, he pried open her fingers. There, nestled in her palm, was a silver ring with a single turquoise stone, his father's ring. The same ring he'd pawned in Denver 6 months ago to pay off a gambling debt. How in God's name? He breathed, staring at the impossibility before him. The woman's eyes closed again, her breathing shallow and rapid. Questions would have to wait. With gentle movements, Flint lifted her into his arms, wincing as she cried out in pain. The wound at her side was still seeping blood, and fever heated her skin despite the cool rain. The climb back up the ravine was treacherous, mud sliding beneath his boots as he carried her. Thunder nickered nervously at the scent of blood. Flint managed to drape the woman over his saddle before mounting behind her, one arm secure around her waist to keep her from falling. "Hold on," he whispered, though he doubted she could hear him. Challies isn't far. Rain pelted them as Thunder picked his way carefully along the trail. Flint's mind raced with questions. Who was she? How did she know his name? And the ring, his father's ring, how had she come to possess it? The woman moaned, her head lolling against his chest as he urged the horse faster. Night had fully descended by the time the lights of Challies came into view. The small Montana settlement was little more than a main street with a handful of businesses, but it boasted one thing: Flint desperately needed a doctor. He guided Thunder directly to the small white building at the edge of town, its window still glowing with lamplight despite the late hour. "Doc Adams," Flint shouted, dismounting awkwardly while trying to support the woman's limp form. "Doc, I need help." The door swung open, revealing the weathered face of Challies' only physician. "Flint Morgan," the older man said, eyes widening at the sight before him. "What trouble have you found now, son?" "Not mine," Flint replied, carrying the woman toward the door. "Found her in the ravine east of town. She's been shot, I think." Doc Adams ushered him inside, quickly clearing a table in the examination room. "Lay her down here, gently now." Flint placed her on the table, her wet hair leaving dark streaks on the wood. In the bright lamplight, he could see her face clearly for the first time, heart-shaped, with a small scar near her right eyebrow. Her clothes were fine, if ruined the kind worn by wealthy ladies from back east. "She said my name, Doc," Flint said quietly as the physician cut away the blood-soaked fabric around her wound. "And she had this." He held out the ring, the turquoise stone catching the light. Doc Adams spared it only a glance. "Questions later. Right now, I need to get this bullet out before infection sets in. Make yourself useful and boil some water." For the next hour, Flint paced the small waiting area, listening to the occasional moan from the examination room as Doc worked. The rain continued to drum against the windows, punctuated by rumbles of thunder that shook the glass in its frame. He turned the ring over and over in his fingers, the weight of it familiar. It had been his father's most prized possession, passed down from Flint's grandfather who had received it from a Navajo healer after saving the man's son from drowning. According to family legend, the stone held protective powers. Flint had never believed in such things, not until his father had died wearing it shot in the chest during a cattle raid. The ring hadn't protected James Morgan then, and Flint had carried it for years afterward, a reminder of promises he'd failed to keep. Then came that disastrous poker game in Denver, and with debts mounting, he'd pawned the ring to a shopkeeper named Hollister. How it had ended up clutched in the hand of a wounded stranger was beyond comprehension. The door to the examination room finally opened. Doc Adams emerged, wiping bloody hands on a towel. His expression was grim but not defeated. "She'll live," he announced. "Bullet went clean through her side, missed anything vital by some miracle. She's lost a good deal of blood, though, and there's fever setting in." "Did she wake?" "Say anything else?" Flint asked. Doc shook his head. "Not a word, but there's something else." He gestured for Flint to follow him back into the room. The woman lay still on the table, now covered with a clean sheet. Her breathing seemed stronger, her face peaceful in unconsciousness. Doc Adams moved to a small side table where he'd placed her belongings: the torn dress, muddy boots, and a small leather satchel. "This was tied around her waist, under her dress," he said, handing the satchel to Flint. "Thought you might want to see what's inside, considering she knows your name." The satchel was light, its leather worn but good quality. Flint opened it carefully, finding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. As he unwrapped it, his breath caught. A stack of letters tied with string, and on top, a daguerreotype in a silver frame. The image showed a man standing beside a seated woman, both dressed in their finest. The man was Flint himself, though he had no memory of ever sitting for such a portrait. And the woman beside him, smiling serenely at the camera, was the stranger who now lay unconscious before him. "What in the hell?" he whispered, turning the frame over. On the back, an inscription: "Flint and Eleanor Morgan, April 18, 1873. "You know her after all?" Doc asked, watching his face. Flint shook his head slowly. "I've never seen her before today, and I certainly never married her or anyone." He pulled out one of the letters, recognizing his own handwriting on the envelope, addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Morgan at a location in St. Louis. "She's wearing a wedding band," Doc pointed out, gesturing to the woman's left hand where a simple gold band encircled her ring finger. "None of this makes any sense," Flint muttered, returning the letters to the satchel. "I need answers, but they'll have to wait till she wakes. She needs rest," Doc Adams said firmly. "I can keep her here tonight, but my infirmary's full with the winter's children all down with measles. By tomorrow, she'll need somewhere else to recuperate." Flint rubbed his jaw, feeling the stubble of days on the trail. "I'll take her to the ranch. Mrs. Peabody can look after her." His housekeeper would likely box his ears for bringing home a wounded woman with no warning, but she had a kind heart beneath her gruff exterior. "Very well. Come back with a wagon in the morning." Doc Adams placed a hand on Flint's shoulder. "Whatever mystery she brings, that woman's been through an ordeal. Bullet wound aside, there's bruising on her arms and face that tells me she put up a fight. Someone wanted her dead, Flint." The thought sat heavily in Flint's chest as he left the doctor's office, mounting thunder for the short ride to the town's only hotel. He needed a bath and a bed, but he doubted sleep would come easily. Too many questions swirled in his mind. As he passed the sheriff's office, he noticed a light still burning inside. On impulse, he dismounted and tied Thunder to the hitching post. Sheriff Ellis Donovan had been a friend of Flint's father and remained one of the few men in Challies that Flint truly trusted. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. Ellis looked up from his desk, surprised. "Flint Morgan, heard you were up north trading with the Blackfoot. Got back today," Flint replied, removing his hat. "Found some trouble on the way." He explained the situation briefly, showing Ellis the ring and the daguerreotype. The sheriff listened without interruption, his weathered face betraying nothing. "You're sure you've never met her before?" Ellis asked when Flint had finished. "Positive. I'd remember a face like hers." Ellis stroked his graying mustache thoughtfully. I'll send a wire to St. Louis in the morning, see what I can find out about an Eleanor Morgan, and I'll check with the stage company someone might remember her coming through. Appreciated, Ellis. Flint hesitated, then added, there's something else. 3 days ago, I had a feeling I was being followed, kept seeing dust on the horizon, but whenever I changed direction or stopped, there was no one there. You think whoever shot her might be after you now, Flint shrugged. Don't know what to think, but I'd be obliged if you'd keep an eye on the doctor's place tonight. Consider it done. Ellis stood, reaching for his coat. Get some rest, Flint. Morning's sure to bring more questions than answers. Morning brought clear skies and a town buzzing with gossip about the mysterious woman the Morgan rancher had carried to the doctor. Flint ignored the curious stares as he drove his wagon to Doc Adams's office. He'd spent a restless night at the hotel, dreams filled with images of the woman Eleanor, if that was indeed her name, calling out to him from the bottom of an endless ravine, always just beyond his reach. Doc Adams met him at the door, looking tired but satisfied. Fever broke around dawn, he reported. She woke briefly, took some broth, still weak, but she's a fighter. Did she say anything? Flint asked, following him inside. Nothing coherent. Called your name again, though. Doc Adams led him to the examination room where the woman now rested on a proper bed, her golden hair spread across the pillow. Someone had dressed her in a clean nightgown, and the bruise on her face seemed less vivid in the morning light. Flint approached quietly, studying her features. There was something vaguely familiar about the curve of her jaw, the shape of her lips. Had he seen her somewhere before, perhaps passing through town, as if sensing his presence, her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded her gaze. Then recognition dawned, and relief transformed her face into something so beautiful it made Flint's chest ache. Flint, she whispered, her voice stronger than the night before. She reached for him with trembling fingers. You found me. He took her hand, uncertain but unwilling to upset her. Yes, I found you. Do you remember what happened? Her brow furrowed as she struggled to piece together memories. We were at the way station. There was a man asking questions, then the shots. She clutched his hand tighter. I thought they killed you. Flint exchanged a glance with Doc Adams, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I'm fine, Flint assured her gently, but I need to understand. Who are you? The question seemed to confuse her. What do you mean? I'm Eleanor, your wife. When he didn't respond, fear crept into her eyes. Flint, don't you recognize me? Before he could answer, Doc Adams intervened. Mrs. Morgan, you've suffered a serious injury and lost a great deal of blood. Confusion is common. Rest now and answers will come later. He turned to Flint. Help me get her to your wagon. The sooner she's settled at the ranch, the better. Together, they carefully moved Eleanor, wrapped in blankets against the morning chill. She winced with pain but didn't complain, her eyes never leaving Flint's face. The devotion in her gaze made him profoundly uncomfortable. It was meant for a man she believed him to be, not the man he was. With Eleanor settled in the back of the wagon on a pallet of straw and blankets, Doc Adams pulled Flint aside. Go easy with her, he advised. Whatever's happening here, she believes with all her heart that you're her husband. Contradicting her directly could worsen her condition. So I'm supposed to play along? Flint asked incredulously, just until she's stronger. Give her a few days of rest and her mind might clear on its own. The doctor handed him a small bottle. Laudanum for the pain, 3 drops, no more when needed. The drive to the Morgan ranch took nearly an hour, following the winding path that led from Challies into the rolling foothills. Flint's grandfather had claimed this land 30 years earlier, building a modest operation that had grown under his father's guidance. Now it fell to Flint to maintain the family legacy 1,500 acres of good grazing land, a herd of prime cattle, and the sprawling ranch house that had been expanded over the years. Eleanor drifted in and out of sleep during the journey, occasionally murmuring words Flint couldn't catch. Once, she reached for his hand again, pressing it to her cheek before falling back into slumber. The simple gesture of affection left him more shaken than he cared to admit. Mrs. Peabody was waiting on the porch when they arrived, arms crossed over her ample bosom, gray hair pulled into its customary tight bun. The housekeeper had practically raised Flint after his mother's death, and she didn't hesitate to make her displeasure known. "So this is the wounded stranger everyone's talking about," she said, eyeing the bundle in the wagon bed. "And just where do you expect me to put her, Flint Morgan? The east bedroom hasn't been aired in months." "She can have my room," Flint said, lifting Eleanor as gently as possible. "I'll sleep in the bunkhouse." Mrs. Peabody's expression softened as she got her first look at Eleanor's face. "Poor child, what happened to her?" "That's what I aim to find out," Flint replied, carrying Eleanor into the house. His bedroom was the largest in the ranch house, with a four-poster bed that had been his parents'. The room was simply furnished but comfortable, with a hand-woven rug covering the pine floor and curtains. Mrs. Peabody had sewn herself framing the window that overlooked the eastern pasture. Eleanor stirred as he laid her on the bed. "Are we home?" she asked drowsily. "Yes," Flint answered, the lie easier than he expected. "You're safe now," she smiled, her eyes already closing again. "I knew you'd come for me, Mrs." Peabody shooed him from the room, announcing she would see to Eleanor's comfort. Flint retreated to his office, where he spent the next hour examining the contents of the leather satchel more thoroughly. The letters, all addressed to Eleanor in his handwriting, detailed cattle sales, weather reports, and tender expressions of love for a wife left behind in St. Louis. They were dated over a period of 6 months, from November 1872 to April 1873. The final letter spoke of his joy that she would finally be joining him in Montana. Yet in November 1872, Flint had been driving cattle to Kansas City, nowhere near Montana territory. By April 1873, he had been working as a scout for the Army at Fort Ellis. He had never written these letters, never married this woman, never posed for the daguerreotype that showed them as a happy couple. A knock at the office door interrupted his thoughts. It was Mrs. Peabody, her expression troubled. "She's asking for you," she said, "and Flint." She called me by name, knew exactly who I was, right down to complimenting the quilt on the bed that I made last winter. Said she'd help me pick out the fabric. Cold prickled along Flint's spine. "That's not possible, she's never been here before." "Well, she knows things only someone who's lived in this house would know." Mrs. Peabody twisted her apron in her hands. "There's something strange happening here, and I don't like it one bit." Flint returned to the bedroom to find Eleanor propped up against the pillows. Some color returned to her cheeks. Mrs. Peabody had helped her into one of Flint's mother's old nightgowns, the white cotton emphasizing the gold of her hair and the green of her eyes. "Mrs. Peabody hasn't changed a bit," Eleanor said with a weak smile, "still fussing over everyone and everything." Flint pulled a chair beside the bed, determined to get answers. "Eleanor, I need you to tell me everything you remember, how we met, when we married, all of it." Her smile faltered. "You really don't remember me, do you? Humor me," he said, careful to keep his tone gentle. She sighed, wincing slightly at the pain in her side. "We met in St. Louis at my father's mercantile. You were buying supplies before heading west. You came back every day for a week, claiming you needed one more thing, until finally you admitted you were only coming to see me." Her eyes took on a faraway look, lost in the memory. "You courted me for 3 months, even though my father disapproved." Said a rancher from Montana territory was no match for his daughter. "Your father's name?" Flint asked. "Edward Zimmerman," she replied without hesitation. "He owns Zimmerman's Dry Goods on Market Street. My mother died when I was 12, so it was just the two of us until I married you." The name meant nothing to Flint, but the details were specific enough to check. "And when did we marry?" "August 15, 1872. It was a small ceremony, just us, my father, and the minister. You had to return to Montana the next day to see to the ranch before winter." "I was supposed to join you in the spring." Her voice caught. "We wrote to each other every week. When April came, you sent for me. I traveled by train to Fort Benton, then by stagecoach." Her story aligned perfectly with the letters, yet Flint knew he had done none of these things. He had never been to St. Louis, never met Edward Zimmerman, never married his daughter. "What's the last thing you remember clearly?" he pressed. Eleanor closed her eyes, concentrating. "The stagecoach stopped at a way station about 2 days from Challies. A man there kept staring at us, at you especially. Later, when we were back on the road, riders came. They forced the coach to stop, dragged us out." Tears filled her eyes. "There was shooting. I saw you fall. I tried to reach you, but someone hit me. When I woke, I was alone. I started walking, following the road. That's when I realized I still had your ring." "My ring?" Flint asked, producing it from his pocket. Eleanor nodded. "You gave it to me before I left the coach, said it would protect me." She reached for it with trembling fingers. "Your father's ring." Flint allowed her to take it, watching as she slipped it onto her thumb, the only finger large enough to hold it. The gesture was so natural, so familiar, that it sent another chill through him. "You should rest," he said, standing. "We can talk more later." She caught his hand. "You don't believe me, I can see it in your eyes." "I believe you believe what you're telling me," he replied carefully. "But Eleanor, I've never been to St. Louis, I've never married anyone. Somehow there's been a terrible confusion." Pain filled her eyes, not physical pain, but something deeper. "I know my husband, Flint Morgan. I know the scar on your left shoulder from the time you were thrown from a wild stallion. I know you prefer coffee with honey instead of sugar. I know you read poetry by lamplight when you think everyone's asleep." The last detail struck him like a physical blow. No one knew about his private habit of reading the small volume of Wordsworth he kept hidden beneath his mattress, not even Mrs. Peabody. "How could you know that?" he whispered. "Because I'm your wife," she answered simply. "Whatever's happened to make you forget me, I'll help you remember." "I promise." Flint retreated from the room, his mind racing. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of the impossible. Either Eleanor was the most convincing liar he had ever encountered, or something beyond his understanding was happening. A commotion from the front of the house drew his attention. He found Mrs. Peabody at the door, speaking with Sheriff Donovan. "Ellis," Flint greeted him, grateful for the distraction. "Any news?" The sheriff nodded grimly. "Stagecoach was found abandoned 15 miles east of here. Driver and shotgun rider both dead. Passengers, 2 man and woman, both shot at close range." "When?" Flint asked, a chill settling over him. 2 days ago, based on the bodies. Stage was due in Challies yesterday morning." Ellis removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "There's more. I sent that wire to St. Louis about Eleanor Morgan. Got a reply just now from the Western Union office there. No record of an Eleanor Zimmerman marrying a Flint Morgan, but there is an Edward Zimmerman who owns a dry goods store on Market Street." Flint felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Did they contact him?" "They did. He confirmed he has a daughter named Eleanor, 23 years old." Ellis met Flint's gaze steadily. "But according to Zimmerman, she left St. Louis 2 weeks ago to join her husband in Montana Territory, a rancher named Flint Morgan." Mrs. Peabody gasped, crossing herself. Flint struggled to find words, his thoughts a jumbled mess of impossibilities. "There's one more thing," Ellis continued. "Zimmerman asked that a message be passed to his daughter." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Said to tell her that her mother's locket was found among her personal effects after the accident, and he's keeping it safe until she can come home to collect it." Flint took the paper, staring at the words as if they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. "What accident?" "Didn't say, but Flint," Ellis placed a hand on his shoulder. "The stage company has no record of you or anyone named Morgan on that coach, just a couple from Helena named Blackwood." The name struck a chord of memory. Blackwood. There was a man at Fort Ellis last year, a surveyor. "Edwin Blackwood. We weren't friendly exactly, but we shared a bottle once." "Could be the same man," Ellis agreed. "I need to see the woman, Flint, need to understand what we're dealing with here." Flint led him to the bedroom where Eleanor rested. She was sleeping again, one hand curled protectively around the turquoise ring on her thumb. In repose, her face was serene, untroubled by the impossibility of her situation. Ellis studied her for a long moment. "She does look like she belongs here," he said quietly. "Like she's always been a part of this house." "But it's not possible," Flint insisted. "I'd remember marrying her." "Maybe, maybe not." Ellis gestured for them to leave the room. In the hallway, he continued. 5 years back, there was a man in Virginia City who woke up one morning convinced he was someone else entirely. Had memories of a different life, different family. Doctors said his brain had been rewired somehow after a mining accident. "You think I'm the one who's confused?" Flint asked incredulously. "I think something mighty strange is happening, and we need to tread carefully until we understand what." Ellis put his hat back on. "I'm going out to where that stage was found, see if there are any clues we missed." You keep an eye on her. If she really is Eleanor Zimmerman, someone tried very hard to kill her. They might try again. After Ellis departed, Flint found himself too restless to sit still. He walked the perimeter of the ranch house, checking windows and doors, though he wasn't sure what threat he was guarding against. The impossibility of Eleanor's presence weighed on him like a physical burden. He ended up on the back porch, staring out at the mountains that formed the western boundary of his property. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. It was his favorite time of day, when the world seemed to hold its breath between light and darkness. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Eleanor's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her standing in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. She was pale but determined, dressed in one of his mother's old wrappers that Mrs. Peabody must have given her. "You shouldn't be up," he admonished gently, moving to support her. "I've never been good at staying in bed when there's a world to see." She allowed him to guide her to a porch chair, sinking into it with a grateful sigh. "You used to tease me about it. Said I'd walk right through sickness if there was something interesting on the other side." The comment was so perfectly aligned with what he would say that Flint felt another jolt of unease. "Do you remember anything else about the attack on the stagecoach?" She shook her head. "It happened so fast, but there's something." She frowned, concentrating. "The man at the way station, he knew you. Did he give a name?" "No, but he had a scar." She traced a line from the corner of her eye down to her jaw. "Right here, and he was missing 2 fingers on his left hand." Recognition dawned immediately. Jeb Harker. The name tasted bitter on his tongue. "Who is he?" Eleanor asked. "Cattle rustler. My father caught him stealing calves 6 years back. During the struggle, Harker fell into a campfire. That's how he got the scar. He lost those fingers when Pa shot the gun out of his hand." Flint's jaw tightened at the memory. "He swore he'd make the Morgan family pay, and he's had years to nurse that grudge," Eleanor murmured. "But why now? I don't know." Flint turned back to the sunset, mind racing. Harker disappeared after he got out of prison. Rumor had it he went to California. Clearly, he came back. Eleanor reached for Flint's hand, her touch hesitant. "There's something else I need to tell you, something I remembered while I was resting." He looked down at her, struck again by the earnest devotion in her eyes. "What is it?" "I wasn't just coming to join you," she said softly. "I was coming to tell you something important. Flint, I'm with our child." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and world-altering. Flint felt his heart hammering in his chest, a strange mix of panic and something else, something that felt dangerously like joy. "That's not possible," he said hoarsely. Pain flashed across Eleanor's face. "I understand this is all confusing for you, but it's true. 3 months along now." Her free hand rested protectively over her abdomen. "I wanted to tell you in person, not in a letter." Before Flint could respond, the sound of approaching hooves drew his attention. A rider was coming fast up the drive, silhouetted against the darkening sky. As he drew closer, Flint recognized Sam Winslow, one of his ranch hands. "Mr. Morgan," Sam called, reining in his mount. "Sheriff sent me. They found something at the stage site. Says you need to come right away." Flint hesitated, looking at Eleanor. "I need to go." "I know," she said, understanding in her eyes. "Be careful." Mrs. Peabody appeared in the doorway, alerted by the commotion. "I'll look after her," she assured Flint. "Go on now." Within minutes, Flint was on Thunder's back, following Sam at a gallop toward the location where the stagecoach had been found. The site was a day's ride at a normal pace, but pushing their horses, they could make it by midnight. "What did they find?" Flint asked as they rode. "Don't rightly know, sir," Sam replied. "Sheriff just said it might explain what's happening with the lady." They rode mostly in silence after that, each lost in thought as the light faded completely, leaving them guided only by moonlight and the stars. Flint's mind kept returning to Eleanor's revelation. A child. His child, if her story was to be believed. The idea was as terrifying as it was compelling. They reached the site shortly after midnight. Ellis and 2 deputies had made camp, a small fire casting eerie shadows across the abandoned stagecoach. The bodies had been removed, but dark stains on the ground testified to the violence that had occurred. Ellis greeted Flint with a grim nod. "Glad you could come. Found something you need to see." He led Flint to a small clearing about 50 yards from the stage. Fresh dirt marked a shallow grave, its occupant now partially exposed. A man's body lay there, the face untouched but the chest riddled with bullet holes. Flint stared down at the corpse, shock reverberating through his system. The face looking back at him was his own. "What in God's name?" he whispered, unable to tear his eyes away from his doppelganger. "Exactly what I said," Ellis replied. "Got papers on him identifying him as Flint Morgan of Challies, Montana Territory. Wedding certificate, too, showing he married Eleanor Zimmerman last August in St. Louis." Flint knelt beside the grave, studying the dead man's features more closely. The resemblance was uncanny, same jawline, same nose, same dark hair. Only a small scar above the right eyebrow differed from Flint's own face. "This is impossible," he said, standing again on shaky legs. "Check his left shoulder," Ellis suggested. The lady mentioned a scar. Reluctantly, Flint helped Ellis turn the body, pulling aside the blood-stained shirt to reveal the left shoulder. There it was, a jagged scar, identical to the one Flint carried from being thrown by a wild stallion years ago. "I don't understand," Flint said, his voice hollow with shock. Ellis covered the body again. "Near as I can figure, this man was traveling with Eleanor on that stage. Claimed to be you had the papers to prove it, apparently. Harker and his men attacked, killed everyone. But somehow Eleanor survived, wandering until you found her. In her mind, you and her husband are the same person because, well, you look the same. But the letters," Flint argued, "the daguerreotype, his handwriting is identical to mine." "I don't have all the answers," Ellis admitted, "but one thing's certain, Jeb Harker is involved and he's not done yet." This wasn't just a stage robbery, this was targeted. The ride back to the ranch was a blur for Flint, his mind struggling to process what he'd seen. A man with his face, his name, his scars, married to a woman who recognized him instantly. It defied all logic, all reason. Dawn was breaking as they approached the ranch, the first golden rays of sunlight spilling over the eastern mountains. As the house came into view, Flint felt a surge of relief. Home, sanctuary, a place to make sense of the insensible. That relief was short-lived. Smoke rose from behind the main house, thick and black. As they crested the final hill, Flint saw flames engulfing the barn and spreading toward the bunkhouse. Men were running with buckets, fighting a losing battle against the fire. "No," he breathed, spurring Thunder into a gallop. As he reached the yard, Mrs. Peabody came running from the house, her face streaked with soot. "Flint, thank God you're back. They came in the night, Harker and his men, 6 of them, all armed." "Eleanor," he demanded, heart pounding. "They took her," Mrs. Peabody sobbed. "I tried to stop them, but they said if anyone followed, they'd kill her, said it was time to finish what they started." Flint's world narrowed to a single razor-sharp focus. "Which way did they go?" "North, toward the high country." Mrs. Peabody clutched his arm. "Flint, she fought them. Even wounded as she was, she fought like a wildcat. One of them struck her, knocked her unconscious. I'm afraid—" "She's alive," Flint said with more confidence than he felt. "Harker wants me to follow. This is about revenge, not her." Ellis had joined them, having heard enough to understand the situation. "This is a trap, Flint. He's drawing you out." "I know," Flint replied grimly, "and I'm going to walk right into it." "Not alone, you're not," Ellis countered. "Give me an hour to gather men." Flint shook his head. "No time. They've got a head start already, and Eleanor's injured. I'm going now." Before anyone could argue further, he was back in the saddle, pausing only long enough to retrieve his Winchester rifle from its scabbard by the porch. With a final nod to Ellis, he galloped north, following the clear trail Harker's men had left. They weren't trying to hide their passage, further evidence that this was a trap designed to lure Flint. But knowing it was a trap didn't change anything. He couldn't abandon Eleanor to Harker's vengeance, no matter the risk. The trail led into the high country, a rugged landscape of pine forests and rocky outcroppings. Thunder was tiring, but the horse's spirit matched Flint's determination, pushing forward despite the difficult terrain. By midday, Flint had tracked them to a narrow canyon, a perfect place for an ambush. He left Thunder concealed among the trees and proceeded on foot, Winchester ready. The canyon walls rose steep and imposing on either side, offering countless places for Harker's men to hide. Flint moved slowly, using what cover he could find, every sense alert for danger. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a flash of blue fabric amid the gray-brown rocks ahead. Crouching lower, he advanced until he could make out Eleanor bound to a stunted pine tree at the center of a small clearing. Her head was bowed, golden hair hiding her face, but the gentle rise and fall of her chest told him she was alive. No sign of Harker or his men, but they were watching. Flint felt their eyes on him, waiting for him to make his move. "I know you're there, Harker," he called, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Let her go, this is between you and me." Laughter answered him, seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Morgan, took you long enough. The lady was beginning to think you weren't coming." "Show yourself," Flint demanded, scanning the rocks above. "All in good time." Harker's voice carried a cruel amusement. "First, let's talk about what happens next. You're going to put down that rifle and walk out to where the lady can see you. Then maybe we'll have a civilized conversation." Flint weighed his options, finding none of them good. If he refused, Harker would likely kill Eleanor immediately. If he complied, he'd be exposed and vulnerable, but at least he'd buy time. "I'm coming out," he called, carefully setting down the Winchester. With empty hands raised, he stepped into the clearing. Eleanor's head lifted at the sound of his voice. Relief washed over her battered face as their eyes met across the distance. "Flint," she gasped. "You came." "I told you I would," he replied, moving toward her with measured steps, constantly scanning for threats. "That's far enough," Harker's voice rang out. A figure emerged from behind a boulder to Flint's left, a tall man with a distinctive scar running down the side of his face, exactly as Eleanor had described. His left hand was missing 2 fingers, and in his right, he held a Colt revolver aimed at Flint's chest. "Touching reunion, isn't it? Almost like you two really are husband and wife." 4 more men appeared from various hiding places, all armed, creating a loose circle around Flint and Eleanor. Harker approached, his scarred face twisted in a mockery of a smile. "You're probably wondering what's going on here," he said conversationally. "Why this lovely lady thinks you're her husband when you've never met before yesterday." "The thought crossed my mind," Flint replied evenly, calculating the distance to each of Harker's men, looking for weaknesses. Harker gestured to one of his men, who tossed something at Flint's feet. It was a leather wallet stained with dried blood. "Take a look," Harker invited. Keeping his eyes on Harker, Flint knelt to retrieve the wallet. Inside, he found papers, a deed to the Morgan ranch in his name, a marriage certificate for Flint Morgan and Eleanor Zimmerman, and several bank drafts. All forgeries, but excellent ones. "You've been busy," Flint observed, tucking the wallet into his pocket. Harker laughed. 2 years planning this. Your father took my freedom, my reputation, my fingers." He held up his maimed hand. "Seems only fair I take everything from his son, your land, your life, even your name." Understanding dawned like a cold sunrise. "The man at the stage site, you hired him to impersonate me." Edward Miller, talented actor from San Francisco, amazing resemblance to you, don't you think? With the right clothes, the right papers, and a few practiced mannerisms, he became Flint Morgan. Harker seemed pleased with himself. He courted the Zimmerman girl, married her, convinced her to come west to claim her inheritance. "All to lure me into a trap," Flint concluded. "Eventually, but first to ruin you." Harker gestured expansively. Miller was going to arrive in Challies as Flint Morgan, with his beautiful bride and proper documentation. He would claim the ranch was rightfully his, that you were the imposter. With the banker and judge already paid off, he'd have succeeded. You'd have been arrested, maybe even hanged as a fraudster and murderer. Except something went wrong, Flint guessed. Harker's face darkened. Miller got greedy, decided he liked playing Flint Morgan so much that he might keep the role permanently and keep my money. When I confronted him at the way station, he tried to bargain, so I decided to move to Plan B, killing everyone on the stage and framing me for it, Flint said. Exactly, but somehow she survived. Harker gestured to Eleanor with his gun. Found her way to you, bringing all those convenient documents with her. A complication, but not an insurmountable one. Eleanor, who had been listening silently, spoke up. You won't get away with this. The sheriff knows. The sheriff is currently dealing with a fire that's spreading to the north pasture, Harker interrupted. By the time he gets that under control and thinks to come looking, you'll both be dead, tragic victims of a murderous stagecoach robber who returned to eliminate witnesses." Flint met Eleanor's eyes across the clearing, willing her to understand what he was about to do. She gave an almost imperceptible nod, and he knew she was ready. "There's just one problem with your plan, Harker," Flint said, taking a careful step forward. "You talk too much." In one fluid motion, he reached behind his back and pulled the small derringer he kept hidden in his belt, a last resort weapon his father had taught him never to be without. Before Harker could react, Flint fired, the bullet striking the outlaw's shoulder. Chaos erupted. Eleanor, despite her bonds, kicked out at the nearest of Harker's men as he turned toward the sound of gunfire. Flint dove for cover behind a boulder as bullets peppered the ground where he had stood. Using the derringer's second and final bullet, he shot the man nearest to Eleanor, allowing her a moment to work free of her loosened bonds. With a final twist, she was free. Scrambling toward the shelter of the rocks, Flint was pinned down, outgunned and surrounded. As Harker's remaining men closed in, he prepared himself for what looked like his final stand. A shot rang out from the canyon rim above, then another. One of Harker's men fell. The others looked up in confusion as more shots followed. "Morgan," Ellis Donovan's voice echoed from above. "We got you covered." The sheriff and his deputies had arrived, taking positions along the canyon walls with clear lines of sight. Harker's men, realizing they were caught in a crossfire, began to surrender, dropping their weapons. Only Harker himself remained defiant, clutching his wounded shoulder with his maimed hand, his gun still aimed at Flint. "This isn't over, Morgan," he snarled. "Yes, it is," Flint replied, stepping out from behind the boulder. "Drop the gun, Harker." For a moment, it seemed the outlaw might choose death over surrender. Then, with a curse, he let the Colt fall to the dirt. As Ellis and his men moved in to secure the prisoners, Flint rushed to Eleanor, who had emerged from her hiding place. She was pale but standing, one hand pressed to her side where blood had seeped through her dress. "You're hurt," he said, reaching for her. "It's nothing," she insisted, though she leaned heavily against him. "Just pulled some stitches, I think." Flint gathered her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injuries. "Let's get you home." "Home," she repeated, her voice small. "But where is that now?" "Everything," Harker said. "The man I married wasn't you. My husband is dead. I don't know who I am anymore." "You're Eleanor," Flint said firmly. And whatever Harker intended, whatever lies were told, one thing is real: you came 2,000 miles to start a new life in Montana. That life is still waiting for you if you want it. Hope flickered in her eyes. "And what about us? The memories I have, they're with him, not you." "We can make new memories," he offered, surprising himself with how right the words felt. "Real ones this time." She studied his face, searching for something. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "I know enough," Flint replied. "I know you're brave and strong. I know you fought for your life when most would have given up. And I know that when I found you in that ravine with my name on your lips and my father's ring in your hand, something changed for me." Tears filled her eyes, but they were different from before, lighter somehow, tinged with possibility rather than despair. "I'd like that. A fresh start." Over the next few weeks, Eleanor recovered her strength at the Morgan ranch. The truth about Harker's scheme became public knowledge in Challies, with Ellis ensuring that Eleanor's name was cleared of any suspicion. Edward Zimmerman was notified that his daughter was safe, and though he urged her to return to St. Louis, Eleanor chose to stay in Montana. She moved from Flint's bedroom to the guest room once she was well enough, insisting on proper boundaries as they began again, not as husband and wife, but as two people getting to know each other honestly. Flint found himself looking forward to their conversations on the porch each evening, watching as Eleanor's true personality emerged from beneath the shadow of deception. She was forthright where Miller's fictional Flint had led her to be demure, passionate about books and ideas where she'd been taught to hide her intelligence. The real Eleanor Zimmerman was far more compelling than the dutiful wife Miller had molded her to be. As for the child she carried, they spoke of it only once during those early weeks. "I'll understand if you want no part in this," she had said, her hands protective over her still flat abdomen. "The child isn't yours, whatever story Miller created. The child is innocent," Flint had replied. "And if you'll allow it, I'd be honored to give him or her my name for real this time. Summer turned to autumn, and with the changing leaves came a changing relationship between them. What had begun as duty and compassion evolved into genuine affection, and then, almost imperceptibly, into love, real love, built on truth rather than fiction. They were married on a crisp October day with Mrs. Peabody beaming in the front row of the small church and Sheriff Donovan standing as best man. Eleanor wore a simple gown of ivory silk, her golden hair adorned with wildflowers. As they exchanged vows, Flint placed his father's turquoise ring on her finger, no longer a prop in an elaborate deception, but a symbol of protection and enduring love. I, Flint Morgan, take you, Eleanor Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he said, the words carrying the weight of choice rather than obligation. I, Eleanor Zimmerman, take you, Flint Morgan, the real Flint Morgan, to be my lawfully wedded husband, she replied, a smile playing at her lips. That night, as they sat on the porch of the ranch house, their home, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky, Eleanor rested her head against Flint's shoulder. Do you ever think about how strangely fate works? She asked. Harker meant to destroy you to steal your life. Instead, he led me to you. I think about it every day, Flint admitted, his arm tightening around her shoulders. Every time I look at you, I'm grateful for whatever twist of fate brought you to that ravine with my name on your lips. And your father's ring in my hand, she added, turning the turquoise stone that now rested on her finger. Mrs. Peabody says it really does have protective powers after all, Flint smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. I'm starting to believe it myself. In February, as snow blanketed the ranch in pristine white, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, a word that had come to define their unlikely journey together. As Flint held his daughter for the first time, marveling at the perfection of her tiny features, he found himself offering a silent prayer of gratitude. Not for the first time, he wondered about the strange twist of fate that had brought Eleanor into his life, a wounded stranger with his name on her lips and his ring in her hand, carrying another man's child yet somehow meant to be his wife. The circumstances defied logic, yet the outcome felt more right than anything in his life before. She has your eyes, Eleanor said softly from the bed, watching them with a tired smile. It wasn't true, of course. Grace couldn't have inherited anything from him. Yet as the baby's eyes found his, Flint felt a connection that transcended blood and bone, a bond formed by choice rather than chance. And your heart, he replied, carrying Grace back to her mother. Brave and strong, just like you. As spring returned to the Montana territory, bringing new life to the land, the Morgan family thrived. The ranch prospered, the herd grew, and the house that had once felt too empty for one man now echoed with the sounds of family Eleanor's laughter, Grace's cries, and Flint's deep voice reading poetry by the fire in the evenings. On the anniversary of the day Flint had found Eleanor in the ravine, they rode together to the spot, leaving Grace in Mrs. Peabody's capable hands. The land had healed in the year since, grass growing over the churned earth, wildflowers blooming where blood had fallen. Eleanor dismounted, walking to the edge of the ravine and looking down. I was so afraid, she admitted. Not of dying, but of being alone. I'd come all this way to find my husband, only to watch him die, or so I thought. And instead you found me, Flint said, joining her. No, she corrected him with a smile, taking his hand. I think you found me, he nodded, understanding the distinction. A wounded stranger with my name on her lips and my ring in her hand. And now I'm neither wounded nor a stranger, Eleanor said, stretching up to kiss him. But I still have your name on my lips and your ring on my hand. And my heart in your keeping, Flint added, drawing her close as the Montana sun bathed them in golden light, two souls brought together by an impossible twist of fate, creating a love story that was very much their own.